Today, I'm going to level with you. Why I'm changing careers at the age of 45. Welcome to Equal Matters. My name is Rob Hunter. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe, rate, and review Equal Matters if you haven't done so already. Special shout out to Cal, the Guitar Hero, with our intro of the Color 8. The Color 8 Bands was on last week with us. An interview before their live performance and after with a bunch of clips of their live performance interspliced in the show. But today, I'm 45 years old. I'm walking around the streets of Rome because I've made a major change, a major decision to walk away from my talk radio career, something I've pursued for 23 years, something I've loved for 23 years, something I've only wanted to do for 23 years. I want to back you up to the age of 17 because I made a major choice then. Like now, I faced a choice. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, says the old poem. Sorry I could not travel both. That's the case now, as it was then. At 17, it was the choice to pick a college. I had two choices. Northeastern University, the safe choice because I could have got an engineering degree and minored in radio, or Emerson College, what I really wanted to do. A harder choice because it's only radio. There's no backup plan. But I knew what I wanted. I wanted to host their hip-hop show on WERS 88.9 FM. This was a show I listened to as a kid, 14, 15 years old. And then when my voice changed, a couple people said to me, "Oh, you have a great radio voice." And I was like, "Is that a job?" Turns out it is. It turns out I loved hip-hop music, and I said to myself, I'm going to go host that hip-hop show. So this was a step into a harder path, a path that came with many tests, many challenges, trials and tribulations, if you will. And this choice that I'm making now is the same. I know this isn't going to be an easy choice. I know that it's going to come with trials and tribulations. But see, here's the thing. Over my radio career, I've come to like the trials and tribulations. I've come to like the changes, the challenges. And because I was able to go through this process, this journey, and look at the lessons, I'm able to make this decision today and feel confident about it. But I want to back you up even further because as a kid, we always are taught American history. Declaration of Independence says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So for a long time, I thought that that was a country's choice, that we all were collective in that agreement of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as in it is a protected right given to you by God. But over the past 23 years in this illustrious career that I've had with ups and downs, twists and turns, I've realized something very important, that there is a very big distinction between freedom when it comes to our relationship with our government and personal freedom. Because freedom when it comes to relation to your government is outside of your control except with who you vote for. Personal freedom is completely your choice. So that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness really is an individual choice. And the more I kept thinking about this decision as I faced this fork in the road, had the opportunity to stay. It was a great path. I was working with my big brother, Mike Russell, a friend who has taught me so much about life, who's helped me grow, who's helped me become a better human being. It was tough to say no. It was tough to say goodbye to Mike in the professional capacity. But I knew it was something I had to do because of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that has always stuck with me. And I thought about that a lot over the last 6-8 months leading up to this decision. I worked out all the angles. I went on many late night walks. I journaled. I have a process I call writing a rap. Go back to my hip hop music love. The R is recognize what's going on, either in your head or your body, whether it's an emotion, a thought. Then you assess it. Where's it coming from? Where do you feel it? And you sort of get yourself in order to process it. The third part of the rap tool. For me, processing is a number of things. It does involve a lot of walks. Sometimes it involves journaling. Sometimes it involves staying up late at night. It's my process. So I'd encourage you to find your process if you're working through a decision like this, because we all have to face them. We all have a path that's easy, it's convenient, or even another path where maybe you'll crash and burn. Maybe you'll fail, but maybe you won't. Because in choosing this path to go down the talk radio world, because it was a calling to me, it came with the trials and tribulations that have prepared me to make this decision. And that's the point of today's conversation on Equal Matters. Because I think ultimately I decided to walk away from talk radio and talking about politics every day, because I want to look at politics a different way. But not only that, I want to have a different conversation. I want to have a conversation about your pursuit of happiness, because this is an individual journey. A journey for me that began at 17 when I chose to go to Emerson College instead of Northeastern. I chose the more difficult path because there was no backup plan. I was going all in on what I wanted. I didn't have a backup degree. I didn't have a backup plan. I just did it. I don't even really know why other than love for it. So the trials and tribulations start right away. Get into Emerson College, go to find the radio station, and I'm trying to audition for all these positions because all I wanted to do was get on that hip-hop show. Okay. So I sign up for my auditions. I have to put my 3 choices in order, and I put 88 Night at Night, hip-hop, number 1. I put reggae music, the Rockers show, number 2. I don't even remember what I put number 3. The trials and tribulations started because you don't get what you want right away. Got to learn some patience. Got to learn to be perseverance. Got to learn not to give up. So I had to wait an entire year before I got my first shot at the hip-hop show. But I got it. And I took full advantage of it. I learned everything that I could so that my junior year and senior year, I hosted the show. Because my sophomore year, I was a producer. But I worked with a great host. She went by Miss Mecca, Sherry Ann, taught me a ton. And that propelled my growth and propelled me to go forward. And I knew radio was right for me because all I did at Emerson College was just show up at the radio station every single day and work. I applied for news shifts, sports shifts. I applied for everything that I could possibly do because I wanted to learn everything I possibly could. Not even knowing that that would all come in handy. Those skills that I picked up would come in handy when I got my first job. So after college, I faced another choice. To stay put in Boston and settle in, stay close to the family, stay close to your friends, or try a new adventure. And as I was applying for radio jobs in Boston, I wasn't getting any results. I wasn't getting any callbacks, getting ignored, ghosted. So I decided that in July, after I graduated in May, I was going to move to Florida. My now wife, Mrs. Hunter, was in Florida. My aunt was in Florida, so I had a little bit of a safety net. Plus, I knew I could always go back to Boston. So I wanted to give it a shot. So I took a job at a car dealership selling cars, hoping that something would happen. So July of 2000, I'm in Florida selling cars. And somewhere around there, I got a call from my cousin Rick, and he says, hey, this guy I used to work with, he's running a station up in Gainesville. He has a position open. It's a board operator position, a starting level position, Saturday night, 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. Exactly the shift a college student wants, a recent graduate. Wants to go out and party, but nah. I took the job, and I just soaked it all in. And because I went to Emerson, because I had the skills, because I had some on-air presence, I got more shifts. And I started to go on the air, which is great as a 22-year-old kid to have this opportunity. My man, Andrew Lee, rest in peace, just passed away last year or the year before. He kind of flourished my talent because I was willing. So he let me. So this began my career of trials and tribulations, of which eventually parlayed into a full-time job in Gainesville, Florida. But that job paid $17,000 a year. It was hard to get by. I had $30,000 in credit card debt. I had an apartment. I had a car payment. It was very challenging. I supplemented my income by working at the Olive Garden. Trials and tribulations. This is what happens when you go for it. There's no other way around it. I've done a lot of personal development over the last 6.5 years, which has really flipped the script on how I view the pursuit of happiness. And in that personal development, I realize that's the key, is that the reason that Thomas Jefferson and those who edited the Declaration, the reason they said pursuit, because you have to try. You have to go for it. You have to be willing to face trials and tribulations. Because in those trials and tribulations, you'll learn about yourself. You'll learn what you're willing to do, how you're willing to persevere or give up or keep going through it. So I'll give you a brief history of my career, which walks me up to the age of 45 in making this decision. Currently, I'm walking the streets of Rome. It's almost midnight out as I record this podcast because I decided that after saying goodbye, I wanted to come hang out in Europe for a month, something I've always wanted to do. And starting the journey in Rome, you realize how humanity has grown. Because this place, Rome, my wife put it this way, it's kind of like lasagna. There's many layers to it. There's layers underneath the ground that I walk on right now, these cobblestone streets, because back then they had a city under here. And as the city progressed, they built on top of it. So when you come to Rome, you see all these ancient ruins and you see all these buildings on top of it. The many layers of Rome, the many layers of you, the many layers of life, all reflected here. But I'm walking these streets in this city that dates back 2,800 years, and what I see is the basic structure of modern humanity here. Buildings that are old, 400, 500, 600 years old, some 1,000, some even more than that. And I realize that they're the same structures that we live in now, more or less. I mean, granted, back then they didn't have the amenities that we have now. That's perfectly fine. But it was a way of life. We still live today through those many layers. And when we study history, when you're here in Rome and you go on these tours, they teach you about decisions that the leaders made to build the city or kill people or go to war. And you learn from those lessons. And you take those lessons in your own life, and maybe they apply, maybe they don't. But when it comes to our own lives, it's a little bit different. Because what I realize in doing all this personal development work over the last 6.5 or 7 years, I'm only in control of me. Right, wrong, indifferent. I can't control what happens in Rome. I can't control what the President of the United States does. I can't control what my wife says. I can only control what I say, what I think, what I do. And what I'm choosing to do right now is make a different choice. Because the pursuit of happiness to me has become so important to this concept of freedom, which I have studied, spent a quarter of a century devoted to. Because to me, the concept of freedom is the most important. It's the reason why I fell in love with talk radio, because I got a chance to defend freedom. I got a chance to talk about freedom. Because the one thing I took very seriously about not just the Declaration of Independence, but the United States Constitution, is these certain unalienable rights. Rights that we're born with, rights that governments don't give us, that were given by God. And when I think about those rights, I think about our Constitution, and I think about, in my opinion, how many of them have been changed, I would say eroded, but that I can't control that. That's what I kept coming back to when I made this decision, is that I can talk about that all day. I can cite the court cases. I can cite my concerns about them. But there's not really a whole lot that I can do about that. Because what I've tried to do is convince people to vote a different way, to influence people, to think about how politicians make decisions so that we vote a little bit differently. But that's only got me so far, obviously. So in deciding to make this choice, I want to have a different conversation about that pursuit of happiness and the concept of freedom, because the more it comes down to it, it's the choice of your personal freedom, to understand that you are only in control of you. So I think of personal freedom 3 ways. I think of the mind and your emotions, because we all have thoughts that pop into our heads. We all have emotions that cause us to react. It's managing those thoughts and emotions that is step 1 in personal freedom, something I didn't understand for a very long time. I was diagnosed with depression the first time at 19, the second time at 30. I mentioned this before, and I bring it up only to serve as context. Because in my career, I found something that I loved so much that I could focus on that took my mind out of those negative spaces. And the more I thought about that, how my job, my career, the thing that I loved, talk radio, America, American politics, American history, American culture, the more I thought about those things, the more I realized that I was able to get out of my own way, if you will. And as I realized the skill and the focus that I used in my career, I use now for my own personal freedom, my mind and my emotions. Like, for example, today, walking the streets of Rome, I got agitated for a little while. I don't know why, just was. So instead of reacting negatively or snapping at people, what I just did, I stood up. I went for a walk, walked around the block. Walked around the block a couple times. There are tiny little blocks here in Rome, so it's easy to do. I started to move that energy around. This is something that my friend Sierra, known as the Mindfulness Sherpa, has taught us. Is that you got energy in there, it's agitated, moving around. Get up and move, because that energy wants to come out. It wants to get going. So now I do this and record this podcast and are able to level with you because of it. Because that is part of the personal freedom journey that is even more important to me than what our government is doing. I'll give you another story. Reuben Hurricane Carter was a great boxer who was jailed for 2 murders, double homicide. He didn't do it, but he never complained. Because the one thing he said is that no matter what happens to me, the one thing they cannot take, no matter where I am, if I'm in a jail cell, they cannot take my mind. And when he got out of prison, after being freed, thankfully, he said he wasn't bitter. He added he wasn't bitter because if he was bitter, they would have won. So in understanding what Reuben Hurricane Carter went through, much more different than what I've been through. Much more challenging to have your freedom taken away in one aspect, but maintain it in another aspect. I've thought a lot about that. Could I do that? What would it take to do that? So I started to prepare myself to understand that my mind is in my control. In my response to my emotional reactions, my triggers are also within my control. And because I've been all the way to the bottom, depressed twice, and I've been now in a really good place where that happiness now is not a pursuit. It is something I have every single day, but it's taken a lot of work. That's what I want to discuss. That's what I want to talk about, because my hope is maybe it'll help you. Maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe you've tried some tools. They haven't worked. I tried a bunch. They didn't work, but I kept at it. But see, I kept at it because I go back to this career, the talk radio career, and how much it taught me. Because what it taught me was to be almost relentless in the pursuit. Because I knew there was, I don't know if I want to call it a dream. I knew there was something there that I was going to do, and I was going to do well. I just didn't think it would take so long. So my journey began at the age of 17, like I mentioned, when I went to Emerson College. I did the hip-hop show. And then I moved to Florida, got my first gig, as I mentioned. And being at a small station with a small staff in Gainesville, Florida, was a huge advantage for me because I could do everything. So eventually I'm there for a little bit over a year. My boss lets me do a couple of shifts, a couple of segments on a talk show. And that parlayed into a weekend sports show. That parlayed into a 1-year anniversary show on 9/11. I mentioned this in the last couple of shows. 9/11 was such a pivotal moment for not just me, but maybe for you, for so many Americans. It was a massive wake-up call for me at the age of 23. That the world was not a rosy place. So I found a purpose in that I wanted to uncover everything that I could to try to understand what had happened. And we spent a couple episodes talking about decisions because they do matter, because decisions come with ripple effects. Mine come with ripple effects. This decision I've made to walk away from my career has had ripple effects. Will continue to have ripple effects for years to come. But this is a choice that I feel very confident in. I feel very good in because of the way my career transpired, and because of what I learned from it. Because the tests are coming, especially if you chase what you want. Go for it, if you will. But to me, there really didn't seem like another choice. And because I was always able to focus and shift my attention away from my negative thoughts into what I was doing, reading, pursuing my career, into the larger vision of becoming a talk show host, I was able to do that. So that 9/11 anniversary show ended up getting me a job in New Orleans. 25 years old, out of the blue, 1 in a million shot, but I get the shot. Only to be washed away from Hurricane Katrina. Another test. And this was a great test for me because, ego was flying high. Mentioned that as well. So, the test was a humbling test. It was a test to see how bad you wanted this dream, this dream you've been pursuing now for a couple of years. The 25 wouldn't matter, but 27, 2 years later, I thought this was it. I never thought I wouldn't have a talk show. But for 8 months, I didn't. 8 months, I would get up and I would apply for a job. Every new radio job that I could find. It didn't matter if it was in talk or not. I just wanted to get back to work. But no one was hiring. And along the way, I had an opportunity to fill in at a radio station in Atlanta, WSB, a big radio station. And it's funny how things line up that you don't even realize at the time, that you only realize in looking back and reflecting and learning these lessons. But there was a guy named Greg Mosheri who heard me fill in at WSB, a job that I was hoping to get but didn't. But he heard me and he gave me my name to a radio station in Phoenix. And it just worked out very well. But before I got to Phoenix, I moved to Farmington, my humble lesson, a city of 50,000 people, not exactly a radio broadcaster's dream location. But I learned something there too, not only about humility, but about people. And that as I am in Rome right now, Farmington, people generally are pretty freaking awesome. Friendly, welcoming. If you're new to town, they'll show you around. Here in Rome, most people that we interact with speak at least enough English to help you out. In Farmington, it was Dorothy and Sean and Eric and Lacey and a whole bunch of other people that made me feel welcome in a place that I thought was almost like purgatory for me, a place that I was afraid I was going to get trapped in. But luckily, after 3 attempts trying to get to Phoenix, I finally got a job there. Because, that's a test, right? To see how bad you want it. Are you willing to move to Farmington? Are you willing to take the 3rd job that's offered to you after you applied for another 2? Because when you do, when you're going for it, that's when the rewards come. But they don't come right away. They didn't come right away in Phoenix. Certain things did. Got to work on the Daryl Ann Carlo show. We had a great time. That was interrupted by a car accident, which Daryl got a traumatic brain injury and could no longer do the show. So I stayed the producer of that time slot. It just became a different host, Bruce St. James. And I got some mic time. I became the 2nd or 3rd mic, as we call it, as part of a 3-person show. It was Bruce, who was the head of the show. It was Pamela in our news department, and it was me. After 4 years of doing that, Robin Carey was born. Carrie Dozer and I hosted a show. But the universe decided to give me another test because I was fired from that job on a Monday after doing a show. It was one of those conversations, that was your last show. Oh, okay. Universe testing me again. How bad do you want this? Luckily, Daryl, who I was working with, knew the program director of KFYI, my last radio station, put in a call, got to know Neil. They happened to be looking for an afternoon show host. And I'm like, this is perfect. But I didn't get that job. Another test. See, there are tests everywhere. But I did get a secondary job, 5 a.m. I had to be on the air. So I was getting up at 2:30 in the morning for 5 years. 5. Another test. How bad do you want it? And eventually on March 9th, 2020, Russell and Hunter came to be. What's so ironic about that date, March 9th, going back to my love of hip-hop music, which propelled this radio career, March 9th was the day Notorious B.I.G. was killed. So obviously that's a sad day, and my March 9th is not. But that tie to hip-hop cannot be ignored, because it was like the universe saying, all right, you passed your tests. Here you go. But prior to that, 3.5 years ago, I started working with Justin Cross. At the time, he had started a company called Earn Your Booze. And this was something I really liked because I liked beer quite a bit. I was drinking a pretty good amount of beer. Mike Russell, my radio co-host, and I, before we were Russell and Hunter, we had the Brewmans. It was a podcast that was conversations you have over a beer. So Mike and I would crack open beers, and we would just have fun. talk about all kinds of things. In fact, we still do it to this day. We have over 200 episodes. Go check it out if you haven't already. So I've got the Bromance, start working with Earn Your Booze. And then my wife, about 2.5, 3 years ago, decides to start a company. And her company is all about what we're talking about today, change. I'll get back to Earn Your Booze in just a moment. So I start dipping my toe into the water in the entrepreneurial world, the riskier world. Because my wife had asked me, she said, hey, change comes down to 3 things, she said. One is mindfulness. Being mindful of yourself and being mindful of people that you work with, people that are on your team. I'm like, cool. Second thing, she said to me, Mrs. Hunter, you're an expert in communication. Not just performance, not just doing your presentations in front of your team or your bosses, but how you communicate with yourself. So she asked if I could create a course on communication. I did. It's called Master Your Message. And as I was creating that course, doing all the research I had done to turn around my depression and my addictive tendencies to that depression, to my excuses that allowed bad behavior, bad choices, until I recognized the pattern. So that's what Master Your Message is designed to do. It's designed to help you achieve a different level of personal freedom, the level that I've achieved, the level that has allowed me at the age of 45 to make this very big, very drastic decision so that I can work with my wife and her company, Painted Porch Strategies. I'm the communications expert, the MC. And as I started to create this program and started to work with her and started to work with our friend Sierra, who teaches mindfulness, I started to love it. Because it's a different level of love, I guess, when you get to help someone find a light, see themselves in a different way that they didn't before, because you can see things as the coach that they don't, right? You think of Phil Jackson coaching Michael Jordan. Phil Jackson's watching the game. He's not just coaching Jordan, he's coaching Pippen and Cartwright. And he's seeing how the game is flowing. And he gets to adjust. Same thing that I do. I just do it with communication in your own head, or when it comes to performing at work. So that's change, at least 2 parts of it. Mindfulness, communication, and then the third part is teamwork. Because ultimately, if you're in a relationship, you're in a team. If you work with somebody, you're in a team. So the 3 of us at Painted Porch Strategies, we're a team. Sierra, Amy, and me. So change is what we do, which just makes sense why I'm making this change. And as I mentioned, I was working with a company called Earn Your Booze. So Justin started that. It was really workout events so that you could work out and then have a beer. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. Then the pandemic hit. And at this point, I'd bought into Earn Your Booze and became a part owner. So we had to make a shift. And look, Justin deserves all the credit in the world for all these pivots. I just kind of helped advise, I helped coach, I helped communicate. I helped wherever I could. And in this process, it became Earn It All. And it became these fantastic programs to help you get fit and to help you eat right. Something that I've always had trouble doing. In fact, when I get back from this Roman trip, it's a month-long European stay, which is going to go Rome, Florence, Paris, and London, something I've always wanted to do. I'm going to start my program to get my eating right, have a little bit more discipline in that sense, which is the second part of personal freedom, health. So our first part of personal freedom is your mind and your emotions. The second part, the way I see it, is your health. So it's interestingly enough, because here in Rome, we went on a cocktail tour, believe it or not, and we were drinking some cocktails with our young tour guide who was explaining the history of Rome. And as he's explaining the history of Rome, he said something that stood out to me, that the people who built these buildings are standing out right now, 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, and before that, lived to be 40 if they were lucky. 45, you were old. So right now, at 45 years old, I would be considered old and almost dead in ancient Rome or ancient America or anywhere you go 200, 300, 400 years ago. But we now have the ability to live twice as long, maybe even more, which means we can contribute to each other even more. And that's what I view this decision as my hope is to contribute, to help people grow the way that I've grown. Because had I never grown, I'd still be depressed. Had I never grown, I'd still have these addictive tendencies that were putting me on a path towards self-destruction. That would have ruined my career, my marriage, who knows what else. But I was able to turn it around. And I was able to turn it around simply because I decided at the age of 17 to go for it, to go all in on me and pursue my dreams, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's what this choice is all about. I guess I can say it's all about me, but it truly is. In the sense that I've been so fortunate to be able to do what I've wanted to do. I've been so fortunate to be able to face the trials and tribulations, the tests, to find fortitude when I needed to be willing to do what it takes to get the job done. I mean, I have a list here in front of me of all the years that I spent at 23 that were actually pursuing the talk show. So I think I've had my own talk show with my name on it for a total of, I'll call it 6.5 or 7 years of the 23 that I was in this business. All 7 of them were worth it. All 23 were worth it because it led me to this moment today, to Act 3 of the play, where I'm at now, and why I want to have a different conversation. Because I understand this one basic fundamental rule about life, and so fitting again to be talking about this here in Rome, because this is something the ancient Stoics taught. And we were on a different tour today. There's a Castile Sant'Angelo, which has such a great layered history. Started as a mausoleum to one of the 5 great emperors of Rome. That's what historians consider. There are 105 emperors of Rome. 5 of them, 5 are considered to be great. One of them is a guy named Marcus Aurelius. He was one of the Stoics that I often talk about. The Stoics' main belief revolved around the dichotomy of control and understanding that you can only control you. And what does it mean? What you say, what you think, what you do. That's it. It's pretty simple. Now, it's not easy to get there. And I'm still not, it may never be 100% there because certain things trigger me. One of the things that's triggering me here in Rome, the secondhand smoke. But it's part of Roman life. I got to adapt to it because I cannot control if other people are going to smoke near me or not. I don't like the smell of it. It irritates me. But in Rome, it's a thing. So it's adapt to this environment. It's adapting to life. It's adapting to the tests, the challenges. It's adapting to who's in your life. Understanding that fundamental rule, that only you can control you. So where Equal Matters is going to go from here is conversations like that. So in the next couple of weeks, I want to walk through some of the most important lessons I learned about life because I chose to go for it. In fact, that's rule number 1. I don't know if you believe this. I have come to believe this. We all have something that calls to us, something that feels right, something that we want to do. Something maybe for you that's been there for a long time. Maybe you're in your 50s, it's still calling to you. Maybe you're in your 20s. Maybe you're 15. Maybe you're 75. It's never too late. It's never too late to listen, to follow, to try to understand that main rule that you can only control you. And there's a bunch of tools, a bunch of work, a bunch of things that you can do. But just like my talk radio career, your personal journey, your personal pursuit of happiness is the exact same thing. It's a pursuit. It is a practice. That's what the Stoics called it, because you always have to practice. Mindfulness is a practice. Communication is a skill that you practice. So even though I happen to be a communication expert, I still mess things up every now and again because I'm not perfect, nor will I ever be. I just look at things differently now because I'm in control of me. So every time I mess up, I don't beat myself up about it, at least for a long time. I might give myself a few minutes, beat myself up about it, and eventually got to move on to learn the lesson that is being offered to me. Because that's part of what we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks too, is how to face that journey, that calling, when you have opportunities to learn. Because that's really what I've come to believe at the age of 45, life is really about. It's about growth. It's about challenging yourself. It's about taking the hard path. Because that's that path that leads to you at the end of your life, which happens to all of us, being fulfilled, to not having regrets, to not laying there on your deathbed saying, I wish I would have done this, I wish I would have done that. For me right now at the age of 45 saying, I wish I had gone to Europe. Well, I did go to Europe for a month, something I've always wanted to do because it's going to broaden my perspective, going to give me a different point of view, and it already has. I've been in Rome for 5 days. I'm already thinking about things a completely different way. I'm already thinking about how little life has changed since 1750 to now. Yeah, sure, there's been advancements, but as I mentioned, the basic way that we live is still the same, which gets back to me, my role in my life, and what I'm in control of. That's ultimately why I decided to make this decision, because it's time to go all in, as it always has been. We can say again, but I've always done it. I don't know what the journey is going to bring, but I do know this. I'm going to give it my all, just like I gave my radio career it all. I want to help people get healthy, because that's part of your personal freedom. I want to help people get their mind and their emotions under their control, if I can. And then the third part of personal freedom, money, finances, which I hope that this leads to. A contribution that contributes to me because I can offer value. That's the hope. That's the new dream. Because the honest truth is, Russell and Hunter was the dream. And I got to do it starting at the age of 41 up to the age of 45. So right now, in Rome, I'd be almost dead if this were 1700 or 1500. But I know I got so much more life ahead of me, so much more to live, so much more to grow, so much more to do, so much more to achieve, that this choice seemed like the right choice. Not just seemed like, I know this is the right choice. So I hope that this resonates with you, and I hope that you listen to that calling. And I hope that if you have any questions, you can reach out to me anytime. rob@equalmatters.com is the email address. You can find me anywhere on social media. This is the conversation that we have to have, because the world's going to keep on going. And here in Rome, they got dead people everywhere. They were rich. They had palaces. They had mausoleums. But none of them were able to take it with them, because you only get to live your life, start to finish. And luckily for me, at the age of 17, I decided to live my life. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure how. I just listened. Big part of a communication lesson. Listen. Listen to yourself. Start working on that, on your communication, how you talk to yourself, and what you say to yourself, and how you talk to yourself when you mess up. Look, it takes work. It's taken me 45 years to get here. It wasn't until the age of 39 that I started to really start to manage my depression fully. And it took a lot of work. Sitting around on my couch, doing my RAP process that I've explained to you. Recognize, assess, process. Because like with my career, I was willing to do whatever it takes. And I'm still willing to do that today. My name is Rob Hunter. Thank you for being here on Equal Matters. Rate, review us, subscribe. And if you know someone that needs to hear this or could benefit from this, share this with them. Because this is a contribution effort for all of us to try to collectively live with liberty and pursue our happiness. Good night.